Hi, welcome back to educator.com. This lesson covers the KML XML-based map language and its use in Google Earth and Google Maps. One of the more popular software applications of the past half-decade is Google Earth. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at KML, which is the language that underlies all Google Earth place marks and other points of reference. We're going to take a look at how we set up a place mark and how we can edit our KML. We're going to use an XML feature called See Data Sections to allow us to include other information. And we're going to see how we can use these to add HTML to your KML to create richer place marks and other features. Setting up a place mark in Google involves the creation of a file in KML, and you can manipulate that directly in text, and that allows you to add the markup. So let's take a look at the background of the language we'll be using. KML stands for Keyhole Markup Language. The keyhole part comes from Keyhole Incorporated, which was a company that started in 2001 specifically to create a tool called Keyhole Earth Viewer. If you happen to watch early coverage of the Iraq War in 2003, you might have noticed a lot of the news stations had dramatic zoom-ins from outer space into the part of the globe where the war was taking place. Most of that was done with Keyhole Earth Viewer. And the following year, 2004, is when Google bought out Keyhole, and Keyhole Earth Viewer became Google Earth. So the reason that it's not called Google Earth Markup Language and Keyhole Markup Language is that the language was laid out and standardized before Google got involved. The easiest way to generate a KML file is to work through the Google Earth application itself. So let's get started with that. I'm going to bring up Google Earth here. And right now, I've already zoomed it into downtown Los Angeles, and we're getting an overhead view of the U.S. Bank Tower, which is the tallest building in downtown Los Angeles. And I've unclicked all the layers full of photos and other things that might get in our way so we can kind of get a clearer view of what we're looking at. So let's say I'd like to put a place mark at the U.S. Bank Tower so that I can put some information there. So I get my place mark there. And here is my window to edit my place mark. So for the name, I'm just going to say U.S. Bank Tower. And I see it gives me the latitude and longitude. And I have some text I'd like to put in, and to save you the time of watching me type, I'm going to go get it out of a text file, since we'll be using this text for a little bit. I'm just going to take it from here. We'll go back to Google Earth. And we'll paste the description. The skyscraper, formerly known as the Library Tower, is the tallest building in Los Angeles and the 47th tallest building worldwide. So now I've got my place mark here. I click OK. And now this place mark is part of my Google Earth. So if I hover over it, I see it increases in size a little bit. If I click on it, then a speech balloon pops up, including the name and the description that I gave. And it includes extra Google-added features such as directions to here, from here, etc., etc., etc. It's the nature of bookmarks. Now, what we can do here, now that we have this place mark, and I'm going to highlight it over here in my places list on the left-hand side of my Google Earth screen, is I can copy it, use your favorite copy method, and I can open up a text editor. And if I paste what I've copied, instead of being a picture of a pushpin with a title, I get all of this XML code. This is KML. Now, if you are following along and creating your own place mark for your own favorite landmark, then your code's going to look a little bit different than mine. But in case you're following in lockstep, we've actually included a file. A KML file starts with an XML declaration. Different XML languages have different requirements in terms of whether you should include an XML declaration or you shouldn't include an XML declaration or you don't have to. KML, you should. The first element, our root element, is the KML element. And we declare a whole bunch of namespaces in here for the original KML, some Google extensions of KML, and we even have some Atom syndication in here if we want it. The next element, which really encloses the rest of the file, is the document element. It's named KML file by default. First thing it includes is a whole bunch of style elements. These style elements actually describe the icon itself, the actual pushpin icon that appears on my Google Earth screen. It talks about which image they're using. In this case, it's a yellow pushpin by default. It talks about how it should behave when it's hovered over. For example, the default behavior is that a pushpin place mark will enlarge slightly to call attention to itself when you hover your mouse over it. That kind of thing is all described in these style elements. And then we have the place mark element itself. This here is the information that I typed in. I gave the place mark a name, and I put in a description. In this case, I copied and pasted it, but I could have typed it as well. So this is my sole contribution to the entire file. Following that, there's look at information. This look at element actually describes the longitude and latitude of the place mark. In terms of, in a 3D sense, where the place mark is in terms of altitude, all this information that Google Earth needs to provide me with a really rich three-dimensional experience. So all this information is generated automatically. It's stored by Google Earth, and the only part I see are the name and description, which are interpreted by Google Earth and popped into that speech balloon along with what else they want to put in there, like direction information. Now, you may have seen a number of bookmarks, place marks in Google Earth that have a lot richer content than just a little bit of text. They might have pictures, they might have styles, and that's because you can actually add markup content to this description element, specifically because there's an HTML browser built in there. There are two possible methods for including the tag information. One is with technology we described earlier called character entities, which is part of XML, specifically the character entities LT and GT. Character entity consists of this ampersand and the semicolon and the name, if one has been reserved, for the character entity. There are at least 5 character entities that are automatically part of XML. Any XML processor that claims to adhere to the standards has to know what they are. And they are LT and GT, short for less than and greater than, or if you're familiar with HTML terminology, a left corner bracket and a right corner bracket. So all of my tag information in any HTML that I'd like to add can be replaced with character entities. Let's take a look at how that can be done. Here is a file called usbttable.html, and it contains just an HTML fragment with a div, a paragraph containing the same text that I put in my description, and then an HTML table that's going to be kind of a partial table showing part of the list of the tallest buildings and where the U.S. Bank Tower fits in with that. If I look at it in a browser, it looks like this. So this is what I'd like to appear in my window. I've got style, I've got the table, I've got my text for my particular place mark highlighted. So that's what I'd like to appear. The trick is, how do I get the markup into the KML file? If you look at a file called usbce, CE for character entity, .kml, we can see how this is done. I could take up 20 minutes of the lesson doing this by hand, but we've pre-done it for you. So here I've got my description of my place mark. And if I go back to my HTML, I see that I start with a div, and then a P element, and then a table element. So I can see that here, only all of the corner brackets have been replaced with character entities indicating the corner brackets. So here's my div element. Here's the end of my div start tag. Here's the start of my P element. Here's the end of the start tag of the P element. Here's my end tag for my P element. There's the slash for the P. Okay, so all of that corner bracket information, which makes HTML hard enough to read, has now been replaced by these character entities, which make it even harder to read. Now, you can load this KML file into Google Earth. It will work, but I'm not going to do that right now because there's actually a better way. We can see that there's an obvious disadvantage here. If I were to have made a typographical error or need to go back and adjust some data, let's say I'd like to include some more of the table that I got this information from, it's really hard to make my way through all this character entity stuff and figure out what's going on. It will work, because every time that the XML processor finds this character entity, it's going to replace it with the character that it represents. In this case, a left corner bracket. In this case, a right corner bracket. So as it goes down through, the corner brackets that I need to delineate my tags are spat through to the application just like they were part of the rest of the text. And that way, the HTML browser within that speech balloon can go to work and process my HTML. But if I ever want to go back and edit it, this is almost hopeless. So what I need is something that can allow me to add information that's passed through by the XML processor without being parsed through for XML tags, but still allows me to read my content if I need to go back and make adjustments. And that is what we have C data sections for. So a C data section is part of the XML language. C data stands for character data. And we see how we can declare a C data section right here. We start off with what looks like an element declaration in a DTD. And then we include these left square brackets with the phrase C data in there. And then we end it with two right square brackets and a right corner bracket. And then all the text that appears in the middle there is going to be ignored. It's something like a comment that we talked about in a previous lesson. All the text that's in there is passed through by the XML processor, completely ignored by it, and then whatever application the XML processor is part of can deal with it on its own. It's not like a comment, though, because comments aren't meant to be seen, whereas C data sections are actually meant to be part of this on-screen content. So, let's take a look at putting C data sections into our KML. We have a file here called USB-CD for character data.kml. And this is another version of the same KML file with the same HTML content. Here is my HTML. It's the exact same as my HTML file. Only now I've placed it within the description element of my KML file, and I've surrounded it with this C data declaration. So now I don't need character entities. This is as readable as HTML is, which isn't perfect, but it's much better than character entities. Much easier to go back and edit. And then in this way, I can create rich content for my bookmarks. So let's go back to Google Earth here. And what I'm going to do And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this usbcd.kml file. And we see that several things happen. Another bookmark got added to my file here. And also in my list of places it says KML file, which if you recall was the name in the document element of our KML file. So this is what I'm looking at. So here was my original place mark, which simply had a name and a description. And here's the new one that I created. So the HTML browser within Google Earth received all that tag information that's in the CData section. It knows pretty much all HTML tags. You can include CSS styling if you know how to do that. And that way we can create a much richer experience. I can include tables, I can include headers, I can include images, whatever it is that I want to do. So in this lesson, we learned that to create place marks and other content, Google Earth, and Google Maps for that matter, although in a slightly more limited form, uses the language KML, the Keyhole Markup language from its legacy application, Keyhole Earth Viewer. You can edit KML directly without the Google Earth application as text, and then using either character entities or CData sections, I can infuse my KML with HTML and CSS to create much richer looking place marks, tours, that kind of thing. That's it, and thank you for visiting educator.com.